Hello, Mr. Ambassador, members of Congress, and distinguished guests. My name is Rachelle Blaine, and I am the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, Joyce Vanderveen. It is my honor to present the Anne Frank Special Recognition Award to Violins of Hope. But before doing so, I would like to put it in a personal context. Anne Frank would have been 92 today. As a young girl, my mother, Joyce Vanderveen, lived in Anne Frank's neighborhood, and when she was 13, the Nazis invaded Holland. One day, after her violin lesson, one of the shopkeepers grabbed her and told her to run in the opposite direction. The Nazis were rounding up Jews in the next street and shooting them. Eventually forced to leave Amsterdam or starve to death, my mother, grandmother, and aunt escaped to northern Holland, where they found refuge with 3 impoverished farm families. The one possession my mother took with her was her violin. After the war, my mother became the star of the Royal Netherlands Ballet, later moving to Paris to join the Monte Carlo Ballet. She toured 19 countries and performed before the crowned heads of Europe as a prima ballerina. In Paris, she was seen by a member of the Kennedy family, who arranged for her to come to America on a special artist visa. It was signed by Senator John F. Kennedy. She took this privilege seriously and contributed her talents for the rest of her life. Her first acting job was on the live General Electric Theater, hosted by Ronald Reagan. 2 future presidents in less than a year. Not too shabby. She did many television shows and movies, including The 10 Commandments. In 1997, my mother received a surprising call from one of her childhood girlfriends who had also survived the war. This friend, Lorraine Nussbaum, was writing an article on Anne Frank and had visited the museum in Amsterdam. She told my mother, "Your picture is on the wall above Anne Frank's bed." My mother had never visited the museum. She had said, "I want everyone else in the world to go. I don't need to go because I lived it." Once identified as the mystery girl on the wall, however, my mother, who was so surprised, wound up doing a beautiful interview at the museum, which remains in their permanent archive. I would like to share a few of my mother words with you today.
It's very strange to be here and see my picture here on the wall from when I was a little girl in the hiding place of Anne Frank. You know, we lived in the same neighborhood, and she went to school around the corner from where I was. And it was an incredibly awful time. Nobody can imagine the way it was for children in particular, well, maybe for everybody, those years between 1940 and 1945. And to be here again after all these years, it's very peculiar. I don't know what to think, I don't know what to feel. I really don't want to think back too much to that time. I thought I had dealt with it. It's over, and it was awful. My mother came back. My mother was Jewish. The rest of my family was gone, was killed, and Anne Frank, a girl with so much to offer. She had everything going for her. And then I am left here on the wall. It's very strange. I can't quite explain it. I'm not ready to cry, but it's peculiar because I had no idea it was here. It came to light only a few months ago, when an old schoolmate of mine, also half Jewish girl, now of course, old lady like I am, discovered this and said, Joyce, you're on the wall of Anne Frank's hiding place. And I was absolutely flabbergasted. I continued dancing and became one of the, dare I say, stars in Holland. I worked with great comedians here and worked at the opera as a leading ballerina. And I went to Paris. I joined the famous Grand Ballet du Marquis de Cuevas, which is the Monte Carlo Ballet, and that eventually led to my going to America. I was invited by, of all people, John F. Kennedy and his wife. I took a look at America and I stayed. I'm still there. I spent my life in America as a ballerina and in movies as a television star. So for me, it came true in a sense. The diary is a symbol because, very simply, 6 million people, 6 million Jews dead, 10 million people killed over there. It becomes overwhelming. All you see is a mass of people but no persons. You can't conceive of it. But Anne Frank, that's a whole different story. You start reading her diary, you know her, you care for her. It could be a family member, it could be your sister, it could be your daughter. Everybody identifies with this girl. And then at the end, when you realize she didn't make it, after all of that, what these people went through, what she went through, and she died. And yeah, she said, why? Why does this have to happen? It's a terrible tragedy. She is the symbol of why something like this, like the Holocaust, can never happen again, because it's full of Anne Franks, and it has to stop. It hasn't stopped yet. It's still going on, not at that level. But I mean, people are still killing each other in great numbers. For what? And that's why it's so important that all these millions of people who come here and visit and identify with Anne Frank, that they see this and that it exists and that we keep it and care for it, because it speaks not just to us, the Dutch people, it speaks to everybody. Everybody in the world. In my city, where I live now, in Los Angeles, children read the diary of Anne Frank in school. And that's wonderful. That's great.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Anne Frank Special Recognition Award weaves the power of a small instrument, the violin, to a much larger destiny than these instruments could have ever imagined. Amnon Weinstein, the founder of Violins of Hope, who was this year's Anne Frank Special Recognition awardee, understood the power that comes from the legacy of a violin. Amnon Weinstein has spent the last 2 decades locating and restoring violins that were played by Jewish musicians during the Holocaust. He dedicates this important work to 400 relatives he never knew. These grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins stayed behind in Eastern Europe when Amnon's parents, Moshe and Golda, immigrated in 1938 to Palestine, where Moshe opened a violin shop. After the war, Moshe learned that his entire family, 400 in all, had been murdered during the Holocaust. The pain of this discovery led to his first heart attack. Moshe never spoke of his family again. When young Amnon would ask Golda about their relatives, she would show him a book about the Holocaust. Pointing to the ghastly photos of the dead, she would say, This is our family. She would break down in tears, unable to explain further. After growing up to become one of the most respected violin makers in the world, Amnon became determined to reclaim his lost heritage. He started locating violins that were played by Jews in the camps and ghettos, painstakingly piecing them back together so they could be brought back to life again on the concert stage. Although most of the musicians who originally played the instruments were silenced by the Holocaust, their voices and spirits live on through the violins that Amnon has lovingly restored. He calls these instruments the violins of hope. These instruments educate, inform, and touch hearts every time they are exhibited or played. 6 violins from the collection are with us today, and they are exhibited in the back of the room. Before the ambassador presents the Anne Frank Special Recognition Award, we will hear from a man who knows violins better than most and who would like to say a few more words about Amnon Weinstein. Again, Itzhak Perlman.
Hello, this is Itzhak Perlman. I'm so happy that I have the opportunity tonight to say a few words about Amnon Weinstein. Amnon Weinstein and I go back many, many years. As a matter of fact, I go back to his father, Moshe Weinstein, when I was just 8, 9, 10 years old, starting playing the violin and acquiring one of my first instruments from his workshop. His workshop was, and still is, about a block away from where we used to live. So it was extremely convenient. Whenever there was a problem with a fiddle that needed to be fixed and so on, Moshe was there. And of course, Amnon became a wonderful, wonderful luthier. He's a great craftsman. And throughout the years, whenever there was a problem, I would always trust that Amnon would know how to restore something, how to fix something. He is just a great artist when it comes to fiddles, not just restoring, but a wonderful violin maker. So this is very, very wonderful quality about Amnon. But for me, his legacy would be the violins of hope that he started. For me, that is such an important part of Jewish history. I had the great pleasure to play on a few of those violins, and I felt like I was playing on the strings of history, because what this does is it makes us remember what happened. Things that you think about violinists who were in the concentration camp, and they were hoping to prolong their life by playing the instrument. And Amnon has brought those instruments around. And for me, remembering the Holocaust is so important, and Violins of Hope is a very essential part of that. So I think that being awarded by the Anne Frank Center is a wonderful and appropriate thing to do for Amnon and for Violins of Hope. So Amnon, congratulations, Mazel Tov, and I hope to see you soon.
I have come here today not only to present the Anne Frank Special Recognition Award to you, but for another reason as well. Earlier, I spoke about my mother, Joyce Vanderveen, and I told you how she fled during the war and that the only thing she brought with her was her violin, which never left her side. My grandfather, a master craftsman and artist in the 1930s, chose this instrument for my mother because it was petite, as she was. It was elegant, and the color matched her complexion. The violin is a French Mirecourt after an Italian design made in the late 20s of maple and spruce. My mother was also a gifted musician and conducted the children's orchestra at the age of 9. After she passed away, I received her violin, and I have brought it with me here today. Avshi, for all the good work that Violins of Hope does, for your ongoing commitment to tell the stories of these violins and their owners, I would like to donate my mother's violin to your collection. I can think of no better home for it, and I trust that in your capable hands, it will be cared for, played, and most importantly, that my mother's story and legacy will live on. Her violin has a shared history with the other violins in your collection, and I believe this is something that would have made my mother very happy. I would like to thank Dr. Noreen Green, a dear friend of mine from high school, who was also the founding artistic director and conductor of the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony. Through her work with Avshi and the Violins of Hope, she brought this marvelous organization to my attention. Because of her, she led me to donate my mother's violin.